And we're missing who? Hey, Kathy. Hi, Council. Sit there. Okay, could we all rise for the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Fryrick,
Here.
Mr. G,
Here.
Mr. Posnell,
Here.
Mr. Robinson,
Here.
Mr. Sanders,
Here.
Mrs. Schrader, Mr. Sears,
Here.
Mr. Sullivan,
Here.
Mr. Tillman. 9 members present.
Thank you. This is a reminder to silence your cell phones during the meeting, and this will be the first opportunity for public comment. All comments and questions will be addressed to the president. Board and staff members will not normally respond to comments or questions during the meeting unless recognized by the president for this purpose. Comments will be limited at the discretion of the president to 5 minutes or less. Do we have any comments? Okay. You have a link to the minutes of the regular monthly meeting conducted on May 23rd of 2022. And unless there are corrections, I think they can be approved as submitted. Okay. Mr. Sears.
Thank you, Mr. Posnell. Tonight, again, we have a consent agenda. Would any board member like any of the items considered separately, or are there any questions on any of the items? If not, the chair moves approval of the below mentioned items.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Questions, comments? This can be a unanimous roll call vote.
This will be considered a unanimous roll call vote unless I hear votes to the contrary. Hearing none, motion passes.
Thank you. The board met in executive session at 5:45 p.m. on June 20th, 2022 for the purpose of discussing school safety, personnel, and labor negotiations as permitted by Section 707 of the Sunshine Act. No official action was taken. And at this time, we have kind of a sad thing, but maybe a happy for him. Dr. Williams will be leaving us. Dr. Williams joined the district in, I think, July of 2018, following a comprehensive national search. Prior to his arrival, the district had faced numerous problems, including communication and morale across the district. Dr. Williams implemented policies of open communication and transparency, restoring the sense of trust between the board and administration. During his tenure, we've seen improvements across the nation, across the district compared to our peers, as well as schools nationally and in the state. So Suburban's been on a pretty good run. Also during his tenure, the nation experienced a crippling pandemic which threatened their educational processes and norms. Dr. Williams stepped up to ensure the safety of all students and staff during this time. At the same time, we've seen public education become under attack. This has happened through the state as well as nationally and through small portions of the public. Small but vocal sections, I would add. With each of these crises, Dr. Williams has addressed concerns, allegations, calmly, using all appropriate data necessary, always with a measured approach and openness. He always acted professionally and with an eye toward facts and student well-being at the forefront of what we did. To quote Jack Welch, face reality as it is, not as it was or how you wish it would be. And I think that's been Dr. Williams' approach over the past several years. I would like to personally thank him for his efforts during this time and also thank him officially for the board. And we have a plaque that will be given to him. I'm going to read the plaque. which says, Dr. Timothy P. Williams, in recognition of your time as the superintendent of the York Suburban School District from July 2018 to June 2022, on behalf of the entire York Suburban community, we thank you for your dedication and commitment to our school. Moving forward, the administration has recommended board approval for Dr. Rebecca Lorfink as Assistant Superintendent for a 3-year term beginning July 1st, 2022 through June 30th, 2025 at a starting salary of $155,000. Additionally, the administration recommends approval of the corresponding contract, which there is a link online to, for Dr. Lorfink's employment and appointment. Dr. Lorfink's start date may need to be adjusted pending receipt of all required clearances and release from her current employer. Could I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Questions or comments? I think this can be a unanimous roll call vote.
This will be considered a unanimous roll call vote unless I hear votes to the contrary. Hearing none, motion passes.
And I think we have Judge Platts with us tonight to do the oaths of office.
Good evening, everyone. Mr. President, wonderful to be back here at my alma mater. I've certainly eaten more than my share of apple and cherry cobbler in this cafeteria in years past. It is a wonderful privilege to be back here. One, to thank Dr. Williams for his years of service here in the Suburban School District. And I appreciate the President's comments about the approach you took in helping to reaffirm the importance of public education to our community and to all of our citizens, because it certainly has been under attack wrongfully, in my opinion. When we talk about the United States being the land of opportunity, it starts with access to a quality public education, which is what the students of York Suburban have been getting here for how many years? I'm looking to my resident expert. 75 years or so, many years. As a proud alum, I've always said behind the upbringing of my mom and dad, the education I got K to 12 here at York Suburban is what allowed me to follow my dreams of public service. And then I had the privilege to see the benefit as a parent with both of my sons being graduates of York Suburban, and what a great foundation it gave them for pursuing their dreams as a York City police officer, and my youngest now having just completed his first year of law school at Penn State. So I appreciate your long involvement in public education, and again, thank you for your work here. It is a wonderful privilege to be allowed to swear in Scott, if you want to come forward, and Becca, we'll have both of you come forward. I said to Scott, it's been a while since I've seen him, and hopefully he won't tell you how bad I was on the basketball court when I used to play at the middle school early in the morning before I drive to DC for session days and get my exercise in on the courts there at YSMS. So, but it is a really wonderful privilege. And Scott, you're 15 years here and counting, and what a blessing that's going to be to the Suburban School District, its staff, its students, and all of us residents of the district. As yes, I do remain a Suburban resident as well. And so really an honor to congratulate you and to swear you in today. Just meeting Dr. Lorfink, welcome to the York Suburban community. You're going to find you're in one of the best places for public education, not just in Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, but anywhere in the country. The board that serves here and their dedication, the staff, the support of the community, that's been just remarkable over all of these years. I think you're going to be real happy here. So, but if you're ready, you both raise your right hand and I'll swear you. I state your name. Do solemnly swear that I will support, obey, and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and that I will discharge the duties of my office with fidelity. Congratulations. And I can add one final word, and that's to all the board members. A longtime board member who passed away a number of years ago said to me one time, the only thing worse than losing a school board election is winning a school board election. He said it jokingly because he served, I think, about 18 years, Dick, on the board. But for the job that all of you do, and you're paid so well. I sincerely thank you as a product of the Suburban District, as a parent of suburban grads, and as just a citizen, because our founding fathers understood that if we want this democracy to be a great democracy forever, we need well-educated citizens, and that's what public education is all about. So to all the board members, thank you for what you do and the time you give for the benefit of not just the students who pass through these doors, but for the benefit to the community at large of having educated students, graduates of York Suburban. So thanks, and I apologize. You give a politician the floor, it's hard to get it back. So, but have a great evening.
Thank you.
John, I don't know if you noticed that Judge Platt is rocking his orange tie tonight, so I wanted to acknowledge that.
Okay, thank you. We have an opportunity to appoint 2 voting delegates to the Pennsylvania School Board Association Delegate Assembly on November 5th. The deadline for this is July 22nd, and I would take volunteers up until that time. I already have one, I believe, Ms. Frerick.
Yes, that's correct.
So if you're interested in volunteering, reach out to me and let me know. And there will also be an opportunity for us to talk about voting for PSBA officer candidates. There's a link provided about the election process, and the open voting period will occur between September 9th until 5 p.m. on October 29th of 2022. So we have some time, but if you're eager to get out there and vote, let me know. And Dr. Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Posano. As this is my last school board meeting at York Suburban, I'd like to thank everyone for their contributions and assistance over the last few years. York Suburban really is a special place, and I consider myself fortunate to finish my career, my public school career at York Suburban. I wish the students and staff a terrific upcoming school year, and the team of 10, meaning Dr. Krauser and the Board of School Directors, offer you my best wishes for a meaningful and successful governance experience. I would also like to congratulate Dr. and to welcome Dr. Lorfing to York Suburban. You will find your work here rewarding and fulfilling. This is a really good place to be. And you can see some of your colleagues sitting to your right who are going to make your job easier than you may expect. So thank you to the administrative team for being so helpful and wonderful during my time here. The items for tonight, the class of 2022, Dr. Ellis informed me that this is perhaps the most academically talented class that he's had so far, and has set the bar very high for future classes. This year's class, there were 17 medal winners. That represents 7.25% of the student body. There were 15 students who earned distinguished honors. That represents about 6.4% of the student body. And there were 60 students who graduated with a GPA of 3.2 to 3.79. That represents about a quarter of the student body. So that's the most successful class that he has had that he can remember in the last decade. And they've done very well for themselves. So roughly 40% of the student body earned some type of honor, academic honor. On the agenda tonight, we have revisions to the health and safety plan. And basically, in a nutshell, what we're doing is removing the masking threshold calculation and removing some language surrounding contact tracing, as that is less of an issue. And also, we will be discontinuing the COVID dashboard. Thankfully, it's no longer necessary. So we'll be removing that from the website this summer. Also tonight, we'll hear about the special education plan, and I also wanted to mention that kindergarten registration to date is 75 students at Valley View and 73 at Yorkshire, which is about on par with where we were a year ago at this time. But if you know anybody who has an incoming kindergartner and they haven't registered yet, please ask them not to wait until they see the school buses running down the street before they decide to register their kindergartners, which unfortunately happens every year, doesn't it, Tom? So if we can avoid that, we'd be so much better off if we can get people registered quickly, as soon as possible. And so with that, I'd like to, the administration recommends the board's approval of the updated health and safety plan with an effective date of June 21, 2022. Now, it's important to keep in mind that these plans have to be revised every 6 months, or at least reviewed every 6 months. It doesn't mean they have to be revised every 6 months, but they do have to be reviewed. In this particular case, we think it's appropriate to revise the plan. So that's the administrative recommendation.
Do I have a motion?
Second.
Thank you. Questions, comments? Can we have a roll call vote?
Sure. Mr. Sears,
Yes.
Mr. Sullivan, Mrs. Schrader,
Yes.
Mrs. Fryrick,
Yes.
Mr. Sanders,
Yes.
Mr. Robinson,
Yes.
Mr. Tillman, Mr. Posnell,
Yes,
Mr. G.
Yes.
9 members.
thank you.
Thank you very much. And before we get to the next recommendation, I'd like to ask Mrs. Campbell to come up and say a few words about the what we're going to be asking you to vote on in the Special Education Comprehensive Plan.
Good evening. I don't have anything additional to present tonight. I did present at the May 9th board meeting. We were able to post our special education comp plan for the 30 required days on the website, and we did not receive any feedback at that time. So we're looking to approve it tonight. If we can approve it tonight, then we'll be submitting it tomorrow, which is actually ahead of schedule.
Thank you.
They may have questions that you have. I'm
Yeah,
sure.
don't run away.
Yeah. The administration recommends board approval of the 2022-25 Special Education Comprehensive Plan.
So moved.
Thank you. Questions?
I do have one, and it's really a way of thanking you for the work, but can you give us an estimate of the approximate effort that was expended by staff and the community to produce this plan?
Sure. I drafted the plan in efforts of presenting something to our committee, which we did. Adele and I from that decided that we were going to form a couple different committees, an advisory team of individuals in the community, students, staff, board members, to work on a couple different teams, special education being one of them, gifted services, guidance, and then mental health, social emotional learning. It took us about, I would say, approximately 30 hours or so to put the plan together. And there's a lot of great stuff in there that we plan to do over the next 3 years as far as training. And then we want to also get that community involvement piece in. I don't really feel like we've had that in the past, so we want to start that as well.
Thank you.
Other questions? I think this can be a unanimous roll call vote.
This will be considered a unanimous roll call vote unless I hear votes to the contrary. Hearing none, motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you. And the last item under the superintendent's report is the code of conduct presentation from Dr. Krauser. And this is an accompaniment with revised changes to policy 218, which will be up first read tonight. Dr. Krauser.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. Good evening, everybody. The sharing this evening, before I call up the committee work that we did here, this process started for us about 1.5 years ago. In an annual review process, we review policies, and the code of conduct being one of them. It started a little bit first with some conversations surrounding current practices of the code, dress code, and our academic integrity. And at that time, we began kind of to dive in a little bit more deeply to our, I'll say, dress code at that point. At the same time, we were starting to get some legal guidance from our solicitor, and some cases across the state were coming into play regarding the code of conduct, upgrades in technology, and how technology was being used. So in working with Mrs. Jackson and Ms. Bedell, we decided to organize a broader committee and scope the project out from a full overview of the code of conduct from beginning to end. So what I'd like to do is invite Mrs. Jackson and Ms. Bedell up, and they're going to walk you through the process that we've done over the last year and a half regarding the code of conduct and the hard work these two ladies have done to lead the committee and the search and engage a variety of different stakeholders, ranging from parents, community members, students, and staff, as well as the administration. Through that process, we've also worked with our local solicitor and the administrator. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to the two of them.
Pardon me. Well, thank you very much for this opportunity to present to you. We'll start with why we went through this process. First and foremost, as Dr. Krauser said, we needed to work towards the comprehensive plan and its goals. And to that end, we need a code of conduct that supports our district's vision and mission statements. And of course, to practice that periodic review of policies, as it's been a little bit of time since we've really dug into the code of conduct and updated it for today's times. So we did start with invitations to a committee of various stakeholders. We invited 44 members of the community to come and join us on this journey. We wound up with 20 members who did show up and really put forth a lot of effort in the updates that we'll present to you tonight. Of those 20 members, we had 8 students, middle school and high school, with varied experiences. Some of our students had attended schools in other schools in the county, and we had one student representative who had attended schools internationally. We had 8 parents representing both the middle school and high school, and some of those parents had, of course, multiple students in our district. We had 6 teachers. We reached out to YSEA, the building representatives, to find names of staff members to invited those, and of those, we wound up with 6 participants. And of course, some of those teachers were also parents of students in our district, as well as in other districts. And of course, our admin team was involved pretty much every step of the way. You'll see that as we continue on.
Okay, so to speak to the committee's whys, as we really started digging in, to have these 20 members of our community join us for this journey, we really wanted to seek their why. Like, why do you want to be part of this? And you can see some of the feedback that the committee gave us as we were working through this process. They really wanted to create a safe and supportive environment for students. They wanted to preserve instructional time and minimize disruptions to instruction. They wanted to ensure equity in upholding the code. They wanted to capitalize on the code's capacity to instruct, to use it as a tool to teach. And they wanted to acknowledge the changing role of technology. It's been many years since we actually had a solid review of this, and things certainly have changed in the realm of technology in that time. Some of the things that we did not address with the committee were those of legal matters and board policy issues, such as attendance, expulsion, suspension, the levels of discipline. The committee did receive the code ahead of time for review prior to us getting together to meet and to start delving into that. So our discussion focused primarily on the ways that the code impacts student learning and their experiences at school. Okay, so as we were talking with them, they had several, I'll call them revelations, as we were working through our discussion. And these are quotes that we pulled from conversations that we had as we were going through with our committee. The code of conduct has become a greater source of stress than something to benefit our learning. And to give you some context for that, that came from a student who was commenting on the stress and anxiety related to picking out her outfit the night before school. Am I going to get sent to the office because of what I'm choosing to pull from my closet to wear to school? Much of the code of conduct is gender biased. Again, that was specific to dress code. Teachers enforce the code with favoritism at times, and kids do everything on their devices from schoolwork to banking to ordering food. So again, reflecting that change that we've seen in technology.
So our process was one that, as Dr. Krauser said, took a little bit of time. We wanted to do as thorough of a job as we could. First, the committee provided feedback. As Ms. Vidal had stated, we provided that code of conduct to them ahead of time, and we listened to their feedback. Their feedback then shaped a revised draft that we developed based on written feedback, verbal feedback, and then, even emails after the first meeting. After we revised a draft, we put it forth towards the committee for additional input, and we dug down into some of the examples that they had, or our examples, and how they may have addressed the feedback that we received from them. Throughout the process, we did have solicitor review, and we'll speak a little bit more to very specifics with that as we go. And in this process, we also determined that we had the need for a subcommittee to be formed to look at the academic integrity. We wanted to make sure that we had representatives from academia involved in that process. And we'll speak to that again in a little bit more detail. And we had the administrators review several times throughout the process, and the final code of conduct that we will present for your approval was reviewed by the administrative team as a final step. So as we said, we did hear some revelations as we went through this process, and particularly about the dress code. If you take a look at some of these quotes, you can see how some of the policies we had in place were affecting different students in different ways. First, one of our committee members said, educate our students to be respectful and that someone else's attire is not a distraction. More developed bodies shouldn't be disciplined more than less developed bodies. Teachers, especially males, should not be asking or stopping girls in the hall to spin to check for dress code infraction. And finally, many members echoed the fact that there's an inconsistency in the expectations between the elementary, middle, and high school.
So obviously one of the areas that we really did dig in on is the dress code. As we were working through the revisions, I happened to attend a stock and leader presentation related to dress code. So I have included in this presentation their recommendations for you. Clothing is expression, and as such, it is protected by students' First Amendment rights. As a district, we can only prohibit clothing that causes or is reasonably anticipated to cause a substantial disruption, is lewd, vulgar, or profane, promotes illegal drug use or activity, or violates the rights of others. In addition to that, their legal advice states that districts may put limitations on clothing that would damage property or be unsafe, that parents hold the primary responsibility for determining students' personal attire, that districts are responsible for ensuring that students' attire, hairstyle, jewelry, and personal items do not interfere with the health or safety of any student and do not contribute to a hostile or intimidating environment for any student. So ultimately, their recommendation is that districts should implement a universal dress code, and our updated code does reflect that universal dress code.
Similarly, our committee had revelations about academic integrity. As it stands, our academic integrity code does not level infractions in any way, shape, or form. So a student, for example, a student deliberately cheating on a test receives the same consequence as a student who, even if taught ahead of time how to cite properly, makes a mistake in a citation. So the committee saw that this need for leveling the infractions. They also encouraged us to take a look at college policies to match their process when it comes to violations. And then there was really a discussion about reteaching and teaching our students how to ensure that their work is that of someone with integrity. So one of the things that came out of the committee was the idea to allow resubmission of work in order to reteach instead of automatically putting a 0 as the consequence.
Okay, so we took those revelations to our academic integrity subcommittee, which Teresa previously mentioned. And just for clarity's sake, we did want to make sure that we had a very strong representation of people who are knowledgeable and informed in matters related to academic integrity. So our committee did include ELA teachers, both from the middle school and high school. It included department leaders in both of those realms. It included the district's tech coordinator, representation from Library Media Center, administration, York Suburban School District graduate, as well as college level instructor. Again, reiterating the fact that the committee, the larger committee, really wanted this code to be something that could be used as a teaching tool rather than something that is simply punitive. That really guided our conversations. So we reviewed as a subcommittee the policies from Penn State, from the University of Pittsburgh, and from Temple as exemplars of what is being expected at the college level. And what we found really was that our current policy is much more stringent and more punitive than any of those policies were. So we discussed ways that we could use the Academic Integrity Code as an instructional tool, and we established structures for the various levels of infractions that Teresa mentioned.
So upon approval, we would, of course, update our handbooks, which fortunately are electronic at this time, our websites, and our other internal documents. Of course, there's a piece to this that requires the education of our students and our staff, as some of these changes are new to, well, all of these changes are new to all of them. And then, of course, we have the parents sign off as part of the beginning of the year packet, which, again, is an electronic sign off that our parents do. So at this time, we'd like to ask if you have any questions of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, ladies. So as shared, a very comprehensive process has been going on for about a year and a half. We do have the final edits that we've been making in that process, and we'll have that code available when we prepare for the second read of the policy. And with that, that concludes our updates on the Code of Conduct.
And that concludes the superintendent's report.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Chichuli.
Good evening, board members. The way that I've structured the business office report is it is in a consent agenda form. But before we get there, I'd like to go through each of the items individually and see if there are any questions. Okay. Beginning with item 1 and 2, they are similar. These two contracts are tuition agreements for the extended school year. I'm sorry. The first is for extended school year. The second is for educational services for the 22-23 school year. So the first, you'll see that there are 3 contracts for extended school year with the service, the rates being at $380 per day for each of the students. The second item is a service agreement for tuition for the 3 students for special education services at $405 per day. And again, we've had students in both of these programs in the previous year, even in the current year. Yeah, absolutely.
Do you have an approximate budget cost for this, Kathy, for the total? And well, I guess first question is it the same 3 kids, or is this just a provision for 3 kids at random?
So I'm going to ask Ms. Campbell to help me with that.
So all three students did attend the program during the 2021-2022 school year. So this is the extended school year portion of it. It's a 6-week program, Monday through Thursday, 9 a.m. to 12 p.m.
And it is the same three
Yes.
students. Okay, so A represents A all the way through, B is B, C is C. Thank you.
Would I be off base if I look at this 380 and the 405? So we have 180 days in our regular school year, right?
Correct.
So 380 a day is what's that coming up with the right number here? $68,000 a year is the.
Correct.
What are the services that are being provided that are?
These are students that we cannot service within our school buildings due to behavior, severe need. Many of them are nonverbal.
Okay.
So it's a specialized programming.
Thank you.
Okay. Item number 3 is a contract with Music Theater International. This is also an annual item that we bring to the board, and it's for the musical that is done at the high school. You'll see that the cost is $32.20, and that'll be funded out of the student activities account. Are there any questions on item number 3? Item number 4 is the service contract with Sunbelt Blazer Works for the social worker. So this is the second social worker that we have. This was approved during the 21-22 school year, and it is funded out of ESSER 3 for 22-23, and it will be funded through ESSER 3 through the 23-24 school year. Item number 5 is the award for Republic Services, LLC, which is the waste management. You recall that in at our March 28th board meeting, the board authorized the business office to solicit bids for waste management services, and we did that. Bids were advertised in May, and we received the proposals back. We are pleased that that our recommendation to Republic, which is our current contractor, results in a savings of $14,000 for the 22-23 school year. In addition to the savings, we have larger containers and more frequent pickups. So this was a real benefit, and I would commend Mrs. Thompson on her work on the bid specifications. So we would be asking for approval to accept that proposal. Item number 6 is also an annual agreement. It is for the independent contractor agreement for Billings Bilingual. This group provides translation services for our special education documents, and there is no increase to the prior year. Item number 7 and 8 go together, but there are 2 separate contracts. So we are purchasing seats at River Rock Academy. We'll purchase 7 special education seats and 1 AEDY, Alternative Education for Disruptive Youth. The rates for special education at the reserve, for elementary at the reserve amount is $162.99. And the reserve seat for secondary is $136.32. So the savings that we're realizing from the purchase is $47.42 in elementary and $58.99 in secondary. Any questions on the contract?
Do we fill those seats, or is that perhaps we'll use it, perhaps we won't?
At the start of the school year, we'll have probably about half of the seats filled with previous students. We also have a couple students that are out in IU placements that I would like to bring back to these programs, just because of the costs and the services that are provided. So we will start the school year some empty seats. Last year, we found that we had quite an issue with students that move in that require that service, and we don't have any place to put them. We reached out to several different out-of-district placements, and we had a really difficult time finding placements. That's why we wanted to purchase them ahead of time. But we will start with a few empty seats.
So that it's prorated. If the seats are empty,
No, we are charged for them.
we're charged even though the seats are empty.
Correct. Yes.
Just as a point of clarification, 7 is the rates and is 8 the governing agreement? Is that how that works? Is that 7 and 8 are linked?
7 and 8.
Okay.
Because there are two different programs within the same.
Yes. But I think 8, the wording in 8 refers to the contract for reservation amounts, correct? Okay.
Similar to River Rock, we would be purchasing for number 9. We're looking to purchase seats at High Roads. We would like to purchase 10 seats. Currently, we would be saving $30 per student per day on for the tuition. So it's $160 per day with a total aggregate of $288,000. We currently do have students at High Road. Any questions?
Well, a comment, I guess. When we look at these two programs together, if I understand what we're saying, we're going to spend the money regardless. We have every expectation that we'll have high utilization, but there's no guarantee that we'll do it all. In any case, it looks like a commitment of $504,555 to educate 18 kids, which comes out to $28,000 per student. And I just want to comment that this amount, as far as I can tell, is not offset by savings in district classrooms. This is all additional money, correct? In other words, we're not going to save money if a child needs a placement in one of these programs. It's all incremental cost to the district.
Yes and no. I would say because we're also taking kids out of IU courses that while
Yeah.
this is
These are more cost-effective ways to do what we
right,
have been doing.
and that's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not disputing that, but I just want to point out that that total amount of money is roughly a quarter of the tax increase that we're asking for this year. So if we're talking about doing things that are productive to add to the value of our educational program, this is already there. We're already baking these kinds of numbers in, and I just think it's important for taxpayers to understand that these are the sort of pressures that we face because the law requires us to do these kinds of things to educate kids regardless of their circumstance. Is that a fair way of putting it? Thank you.
Along those lines, I'm curious if we reserved 8 seats and it turns out we need 10 seats, will those seats be available come October or March? Or we don't know that? Depends on availability.
Any other questions? Okay. Item number 10 is a memorandum of agreement with Family First Health. Again, this is an annual contract to provide state-mandated dental screenings to grades kindergarten, 3rd, and 7th. The cost is $375 per session. There is no increase over the 21-22 school year. Any questions? Item 11 is an annual agreement for the board to approve the district's commercial insurance policies. The premium rate reflects a 3% increase over the 21-22 school year. I will also mention that at the initial start of the development or filling out our applications for renewal, they were projecting an 8 to 10% increase. So I was pleased that this came down to 3%. Any questions on commercial insurance. Item number 12 is the Lincoln IU bids awarding the general supplies at $28,400.56, paper at $4,579.45, and art supplies at $460. If you compare this to last year, you will notice that there is a $33,000 decrease. And that is for two reasons. First, we did not participate in the custodial bid. And second, the paper supplier, we could not lock in rates. So the paper that you see here is specialized paper stock and isn't even our full request. We're currently investigating our options through the IU and other avenues to secure paper for the 22-23 year. What we're finding is that there isn't a supply chain issue, but rather suppliers don't want to lock in a rate. Any questions on the IU bids? Item 13 is an exemption, tax exemption for board approval under the Pennsylvania State Veterans Commission. They have already been approved from the county, so this is just a formal action from York Suburban. Yeah.
I understand that the basis of this is that these are veterans who qualify for a full exemption. I believe it's justified. But in this case, I think the loss I estimated in the current year would be about a $4,000 reduction in our revenue stream by granting this exemption. And just another example of how this property tax-based system works to the detriment of the school district.
Could we have just a brief explanation of, because we don't have a choice really in this one. Could you explain a little bit about that exemption law?
Sure. So it's a program that runs in the state of Pennsylvania. Veterans apply through their local counties. They have to meet certain criteria, and the exception is good for 5 years, and then they have to reapply. Item 14 is an exoneration for the tax parcel, and you see the parcel there. The address is 1700 East Market Street in Spring Garden Township. The tax amount that will be refunded is $5,168.52. The property was purchased by the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation, and that is the reason for the exoneration. Any comments?
Well, yes, since you asked. This property has an interesting history, and if I read the county website information properly, this thing is currently owned by the Department of Transportation. They paid $1 for it, but this property was assessed in the last, as far as I could tell, the 2006 assessment, which goes back quite a way, obviously, was $334,000. There was a sales price of $355 in 2019, and now this $1, I guess, nominal transfer to PennDOT. Now, if I use the $334,540, the assessed value that was on record as of 2006, and unfortunately I use this year's tax rate, but the tax amount would have been $8,000, which is quite a bit higher than the amount that we're exonerating. I don't think 1 year difference in the tax rate could account for that. Is there something I'm not understanding? Yeah, and one other question, which is the structure of the new county assessor's website, for whatever reason, no longer shows the school tax amount. Is there some reason why they've taken that off? Thank you.
Item 15 is a real estate tax refund. And this is to reflect the removal of 3 buildings on the property located at 711 Olive Street in Spring Garden Township. Any questions on this refund? Okay. Item 16 is a change order credit in the amount of $4,502.48. This is for the chiller replacement that we have, and disconnecting the chillers. The vendors found some efficiencies that they were able to reduce the scope of work. Approval from more engineering was given, and so that realized a credit to the district in this amount. So we hardly ever see change orders that are credits to the district, so we're taking it. Okay. Item 17 is a mileage reimbursement increase from the IRS. The IRS increased the rate from 58.5 cents to 62.5 cents per mile. And that's effective July through December 31st. Any questions on the IRS?
A lot, but they won't do any good here.
Okay. Item 18 is a recommendation that the business office is seeking from the board to authorize us to advertise and solicit bids. If you recall, during the May Property and Finance Committee, we talked about the Indian Rock walk-in freezer, and we told you that it was non-functional at that time. Since then, the cooler became non-functional as well, so we will be addressing both the freezer and the cooler. In investigating the quotes and the different pieces that needed to go with this, we're estimating the project to be $40,000. And so that is, of course, above the bid and quote threshold. And since this is federal programs money, we are required to go out to bid. And so we'll be asking the board for approval for that. The last item under the business office report is approval for the service contract with Lincoln IU 12 to provide Title I services to our non-pub schools. This is an annual agreement, and the funds come through or pass through Title I to the IU. Any questions on any of the items? Would any board member like to have an agenda item pulled out?
So as I understand, this is actually going to be a consent for 1 through 19 minus 14.
Minus
you're gonna-
14. Oh, do you want it pulled? No, he doesn't want it pulled.
Okay, so then what we'll need is a motion for items 1 through 19 as a consent agenda.
I
Thank
have
you.
a question, Mr. President. It occurs to me with the walk-in freezer and cooler. Yeah, the walk-in freezer and cooler in Indian Rock. Are we going to try and get that done by the end of the summer? Is that possible?
Absolutely. Right now, it doesn't appear that there's any supply chain issues with it. So we're hoping that as soon as we have the bids in, which our timeline is to accept bids at the July meeting. So we're hoping that the work can start right after that.
So this equipment is readily available, I guess is what I'm asking.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Other question? Yeah. And so I think this can be a unanimous roll call vote.
This will be considered a unanimous roll call vote unless I hear votes to the contrary. Hearing none, motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Long, welcome to the group.
I just wanted to start off by saying thank you all for having me tonight at my first official school board meeting. It's a huge honor to be able to be one of the new student school board reps. And just to start off, many of the youth camps have been running at the high school. They've been run by the sports teams such as boys and girls basketball and volleyball. These have all been a success and are preparing our future student athletes. Student Council has begun working on homecoming. The date of that will be September 10th. Also add to your calendars the parade, bonfire, and powder puff games. Those will all be held September 8th. The 2023 Minithon committees have also already started off with their summer fundraiser, and that is flamingo flocking. The flocking will start July 15th and through August 28th, and links to purchase this will be found on the York Suburban Minithon social media accounts. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Robinson.
Thank you, Mr. Posnell. You have before you the personnel report. Would any board member like any of these items considered separately, or are there any questions on any of these items? If not, the chair moves approval of the below mentioned items.
Second.
Thank you. Discussion, questions? This can be a unanimous roll call vote.
This will be considered a unanimous roll call vote unless I hear votes to the contrary. Hearing none, motion passes.
If there are no other questions, that concludes my report.
Dr. Sullivan, academic standards.
Thank you. The committee met on June 6th in the boardroom. Building administrators presented benchmarking data for the elementary and middle schools, which included both some bright spots and some concerns. The building leadership discussed how they make use of these data to target interventions and make other changes. They're working on these solutions now. The team from the Lincoln IU also presented the results of a K-12 math audit. The summary report is linked in the committee meeting agenda, and I recommend everyone's reading it. An independent audit team reviewed K-12 math instruction, assessment, and evaluation. They reviewed the curriculum, how we conduct assessment, how instruction takes place, including classroom observations, focus groups, and teacher surveys, and organizational elements such as schedules, grading, the comprehensive plan, and the relevant organizational charts. They identified a number of district strengths, including in our teachers, in the integration of math vocabulary throughout K-12 instruction, the use of math interventionists, the use of some specific data tools, and the amount of math instructional time at the elementary level. They also made a number of recommendations, including a common vision for mathematics for the district, common grading policies, a common mathematics lesson plan, and a plan for strategic communications regarding math to parents and other stakeholders. They recommended the closer alignment of districts' assessments to standards. They recommended the adoption of formal protocols for math resource selection, the identification of different pathways for math, and an approach for accelerated content where necessary. They also recommended training in the science of math, including professional development and planning. Also included in this was more manipulative use in the classroom and greater fact fluency and real-life activities for grades 6 through 12. Again, that's just a summary. We'll be hearing more about the administration's planned adoption of these recommendations moving forward. I've asked for a backgrounder on science of math, and we'll share that with the board and the community when we get it. There was no public comment at the meeting. Our next meeting is October 3rd. We don't have any identified agenda items at present, but it might make sense to talk about the new science standards, which hopefully will have materialized by that time, as well as administrator updates on benchmarking at the school year start and how the math recommendations that the auditors worked on are being addressed. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Mr. Robinson, we have a legislative update.
Why, I sure do, Mr. Posnell. And to all of you out there, if you're feeling a little nervous tonight, it may be because you know the legislature is back in session and they're discussing the budget. But let's turn to a brighter note. I'm happy to report the Senate Education Committee has removed HB 2169 from its voting agenda. This tuition voucher bill may be reintroduced with some amendments at any time, so we'll all stay tuned. Senator Mario Scavello has issued a co-sponsorship memo for legislation to revise the special education funding system for charter students to reflect the actual costs of special education. Representative Rosemary Brown has introduced companion legislation with HB 749 for the same purpose. Senate 1191 passed the Senate and went to the House Education Committee. HB 972 is companion legislation and remains on the Senate floor. Both bills prohibit transgender students from sports teams aligning with their gender identity. Governor Wolf has promised a veto for either bill coming his way. HB 2468 is still on the floor to provide for student mental health grants. The Pennsylvania School Board Association is asking all true friends of public education to be in touch with their state senators and representatives to encourage support for an increase of $200 million for special education, $60 million for mental health, and $25 million for career and technical education. As Eric Dirksen once said, a senator from Illinois, 200 million here, 60 million there, 25 million there. Before you know it, we're talking about some serious money. And finally, we can look across the Susquehanna to those dynamic senators, Ryan Aumet and Scott Martin, who have introduced two truly mystifying pieces of legislation: the Parental Control Over Curriculum and Books, SB 1277, and Parental Authority in Curriculum Decisions, SB 1278. Both legislatures acknowledge there is no clear and easy way for communities to reach common ground on what constitutes appropriate or inappropriate educational materials or content. To some students of history, it might almost seem or appear that these pieces of legislation have taken their cue from the Volstead Act. Legislate behavior in theory, see if it works in fact. For those of you not familiar with the Volstead Act, that's what it ushered in that wonderful era in our history, prohibition. And we all know how that worked. If there are no questions, that concludes my report.
Thank you. Ms. Frary, it's a hard act to follow.
Yeah, you do it to me every time. So unless we change the agenda, Mr. President, I guess it'll stay this way. The Lincoln Intermediate report, you have before you the highlights of their meeting held on June 7th, which are always interesting to see who's coming, who's going, and something about the programs that they're working on. So I suggest you might want to check that out. As to the LIU Joint Operating Report, I have no report. And to wind things up, York Adams Academy had a wonderful graduation ceremony on June 1st. We had 74 students who were eligible to be graduated. We had a packed auditorium at the York Learning Center, and York Suburban had 7 students graduate, bringing our total for the year to 10. Our graduates were Elijah Bell, Henry Ducker, Natalie Hess, Isaac Patterson, Jacob Potter, Marcos Valdez, and Malia Yin. So we were well represented and had a really very, very good year, and we're looking for some new and exciting things next year. And that concludes my reports.
Thank you. York Adams Tax Bureau?
No report.
Thank you. York County School of Technology?
Yes, thank you. I'd like to thank Mr. Posnow for attending the meeting last month in my absence. He's the alternate, and he stepped in for me, and I appreciate it. York County School of Technology held its graduation on the 7th of June and graduated 13 students from York Suburban. And I just wanted to quickly run down the different programs that those 13 students majored in, so to speak, their program of study. 3 students did criminal justice. 2 were in licensed cosmetology. Then we had 1 early childhood, 1 IT systems, 1 culinary, 1 in power sports and engine technology, 1 in automotive technology, 1 in engineering and advanced manufacturing, 1 in networking and cybersecurity, and 1 in medical professions. I wanted to run down the list of programs that these students studied just to give you a little bit of insight into the variety of programming offered at the School of Technology. It continues to serve a need in the community, and as I've told you before, I'm very proud to be a part of that school. And lastly, I'd just like to share that I was asked to present diplomas for the adult education practical nursing graduation last week, and it was my pleasure to do that. The graduation was very meaningful. 28 licensed practical nurses going into the front line of medical care. And we're very fortunate to have an institution here in the county that is supported by all the participating school districts to get 28 licensed practical nurses out there on the front line of healthcare, especially in this serious time of need. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. I'd like to thank everybody that sat through with us tonight and joined us. It's always nice to see faces in the audience. You have a link here to upcoming events. You also have a link to the board meeting and committee meeting schedules. And this is the last opportunity for public comment. And with none, I think we can be adjourned. Thank you.